Welcome back. We last left off with me enjoying a perfectly normal vacation in the land of the Down Under and engaging in such relaxing activities as exploring the scenic vistas, enjoying the tender attentions of the friendly local neighbors, and engaging in the time-honored tradition of quite literally looting the lovingly crafted architecture down to its subfloor. All of this work has resulted in a hole in the ground that is only marginally likely to result in me getting spawn camped, 6 chests of the finest solidified bin juice, and a set of armor that is both iced out and lit up. The armor is less impressive than it sounds, since the ice is a form of enchantment, the light is a shader glitch, and despite being made out of gold, it does not make me go but everything else is pretty substantial progress, and it's time to capitalize on that. To that end, I returned once more to my favoritist pastime of seeing how far the ticker goes on the count of Grand Theft Everything charges. I'm reasonably sure that I've gotten all of the important individual things that I wanted from the city, but there will always be a chance of rare enchantments from the libraries, and bulk resource stockpiles are going to be somewhat useful later on down the line regardless. Nether stars, in addition to being a requirement for lycanitic boss summoning rituals, offer us the ability to re-roll baubles without their associated item type being used. And in this one unique situation, it's probably going to be easier to farm wither bosses than, say, spectral silt for a little while. Conveniently, every mob under the sun seems to have half a dozen of these things stuffed up its butt somehow, so getting my hands on a handful of the skulls, that is, proves to be quite trivial. If anything, spanking the boss is even harder. We are, after all, in the Nether, home of a ginormous unbreakable-ish bedrock ceiling that does terrible, terrible things to Wither Boss pathing AI. Simply slap down a block of obsidian on the carefully selected area that will trap the boss on all 4 sides and above, spawn in your extremely irate crunchy demon on flat Stanley mode to control where it pops up, and wait for it to blow its top. You can then stab it repeatedly as it loses its head everywhere. As long as the obsidian doesn't get blue-skulled, you are fine, and if it does, you can just run down a tiny hole and stab it that way instead. Easy peasy, 1 free nether star plus a health container worth of shards, no questions asked. Now, the health is nice, but for the moment I mostly just care about the nether star, because once I finish hunting down some more vapulas and scraping lapis out of places best left unmentioned, it will let me craft a regeneration potion ring. These rings are honestly not all that good in the grand scheme of things, but they will fill a very valuable niche for the moment, in that they give me some low-level passive regen. Despite all of my whinging, most mobs don't actually one-shot me in gold armor as long as you aren't being an idiot and the mob isn't a pinky, and most of my mob deaths are now due to accumulated chip damage as a result. Their healing rate leaves a lot to be desired, but bandages aren't going to be a thing due to string and wool shortages, and medkits need mending to be usable en masse, so this is a distant third best option. Despite the effect not being all that great, the ring itself is an excellent starting bauble. Even in my resource-strapped situation, it's cheap to produce. It carries 2 different kinds of bauble buffs when reforged, and it re-rolls one of those buffs with gold ingots, so given time, it's pretty close to free. I didn't get terribly lucky with those rolls, admittedly, so it still kind of sucks, but it does the job for now. Somewhere around this time, another one of those useless Lycanite event triggers, forcing me to find a nice gold spot in the wall and block myself in. I'm already extremely familiar with Hell's Fury, but I appreciate the offer of additional Hell's Fury nonetheless. It's a good thing that those mobs despawn after a while. Most of them explode when they're killed, and I like my everything to be attached intact and not terribly well ventilated, thank you very much. With a couple regeneration rings installed under my belt and keeping me topped up, clearing out the dungeon becomes far less of an exercise in cheese and far more of an exercise in just trying to slowly, carefully, painfully chop away at the hordes of monsters spraying out all over the place. A lot of the spawners I can break with no issues, but unfortunately, quite a few of those fine fellows will give me heads if I beat them in just the right way, so I have to take my due diligence and use the random steel weapon I found number 67 a lot of the time on them. Incidentally, it sure is nice that the demonic hordes have generously and specifically stocked their chests with only weapons made out of materials that they are weak to. Makes about as much sense as a fairy skinny dipping in a bucket of rusty nails, but when it comes to logic, my house has a few too many windows for me to be comfortable with the idea of juggling boulders, so we'll leave that thought there. And situations like this are exactly why that I care about the regeneration. That is, not that I worry about juggling boulders in a house made of glass. The purple fire skeleton here has the thorns effect, but it doesn't seem to be strong enough to one-shot me. Before, I would have either had to lure the skeleton back to my respawn point and chain spawn it to take it out, or more likely just die to it and lose it to a despawn. But here, I can hide in a hole, whittle it down, and slowly regenerate myself while feeding my armor from bank XP levels. In return, I get lots and lots of money in the form of crystal shards and XP. These fellows can also drop their armor, as you see here, and oftentimes it's pretty well enchanted. Thorns, in this case, doesn't do much for me, but it could have easily been protection or unbreaking or something actually useful. After spending a few more hours slowly tripping my way through the perfectly average New York City experience, complete with random hobos attempting to pee on me and or sell me their mixtapes at knife point, and way too many bugs, I can say one thing, and one thing only. Looting this city was totally not worth it, and ironically, whoever made this place was broke as hell. The thing with the 3 lycanitic wingding bosses is that you don't actually need a whole lot of stuff to beat them up. You just need some very specific stuff, and that specific stuff is a decent bow with decent enchantments and enough effective HP to prevent you from being turned into extra chunky salsa if you get hit in the noggin a couple of times. The city had basically none of the stuff to make that. Sure, it was crammed to the gills with gold and gems and stuff, but last I checked, blocks of gold do not make terribly good weapons, and the only reason I care about diamonds is because they make nice pointy arrow tips and summoning catalysts. In fact, the most useful thing I got from the whole place was the wither skulls, from the mobs that I killed, and a whole bunch of building materials. And now, pro gamer goose tip, if people are ignoring the loot in your dungeon in favor of stealing your fancy granite countertops and stylish understated wooden floor paneling, that is a strong indicator that you need to get better loot. That being said, compared to the nothing I had before, this something that I have now is sitting quite pretty. Incidental enchanted books from the few decent lootable areas of the city gave me a bit of protection for my helm and chestplate, and even a single level of strength and vitality, which, when combined with all the heart containers from the withers and ring buffs, gives me a whole extra row and a half of hearts to play with, and also the passive regen 2 buff, neither of which I'm going to sneeze at. In fact, my setup is finally good enough, and more importantly, self-sustaining enough, that I can even start taking limited forays out into the wastes of the Nether and, traveling, instead of piling bodies up around my spawn point and treating them like Halloween-themed fortifications. Mind you, this is not fast travel, since I do legitimately have to kill everything that spots me, otherwise I will die, but as long as I'm only fighting 1 or 2 mobs at a time, and, well, my armor and gear self-repairs, my health regenerates, my debuffs wear off naturally, and I don't get ganked, I can survive long enough to find some interesting things. Such as this lovely little artifact of engineering. This is the Nether equivalent of a Doom-like dungeon. Unlike the City of Disappointment and surprisingly useful public infrastructure, Doom-like dungeons have things in them that I can actually use, like baubles and enchantments, and also lots and lots and lots of vanilla magma slime spawners that I can use to farm out easy purple fire mob kills, and, more importantly, mini-boss kills for enchanted books. There is, however, 2 catches. The first is that I am dying of thirst, which is not actually as big of an issue as I thought it would be originally, as long as you don't mind sounding like a broken stopwatch and flinching all the time. Regeneration 2 counteracts dehydration damage quite handily for the first few minutes, albeit at the cost of nerfing that passive regen into the floor. The second problem is that when I said vanilla mob spawners, I didn't just mean vanilla magma slime spawners and the spawners that you could find in vanilla Minecraft. I meant spawners that spawn vanilla Minecraft mobs. Normally this is not a distinction worth mentioning, but in this case it very much is, because one of those vanilla mobs that it spawns is wither bosses. Because, you know, why not? Now, in a hilarious turn of events, this proves to not be as much of an issue as you would think, thanks to the incredibly high concentration of constantly spawning lycanite mobs. Withers kill them, and in doing so, they make a lot of explosions, which summons a lot of explosion elementals. The withers also like killing those elementals, but they can't because explosion elementals are immune to explosion damage, creating, you guessed it, more explosion elementals in the process. These explosions also result in the withers aggroing more wither bosses and more dungeon mobs, causing a bigger fight and spawning more elementals. The withers regenerate. The elementals keep spawning and are immune to the, by now, excessive amount of detonations going on around them, and the spawners either keep going, spawning more mobs, or give up and die. So the end result is a Looney Tunes-style smoke cloud battle going on between the entire population of the Nether that allows me to slowly pick up loot and gank the lone mob or two unopposed, before retreating slowly to heal up. That is until the chaos elementals that are spawned by the mobs that the wither bosses are aggroing, shooting the explosion elementals being created by the withers and missing the withers, resulting in the explosion elementals dying, aggro onto me, and then throw me into the lava and burn me to death. That's fine, though. I respawn. They don't. Now, as fun as this chaos was initially, it did end up being something of a major issue. Turns out that filling the Nether with explosion elementals does not actually help with traversing it, or, for that matter, the frame rate. Wild. Anyway, the solution to this is killing the withers, obviously, which is one of those things that's easier said than done, not because the wither boss is dangerous, and in fact they are eminently cheesable as always, but because it will inevitably have an entourage of a good 37 million explosion elementals trailing it like the world's loudest redding train that I have to take out first. Oh well. One down, 10 bajillion more to go, maybe, assuming that they don't lose their short-term memory and wander off. Well, goody. So it turns out the wither bosses don't wander off. Instead, they like to clump together and form into happy familial units whilst repeatedly ramming themselves face first into the ceiling of the Nether, and then having many children, which I am now contractually obligated to exterminate. Remember, folks, always let the women and children go first. Which I am now contractually obligated to exterminate, due to a turn of phrase stating that one should always take care of the women and children first being interpreted in a way that I don't think was intended in its original incarnation. Oh no, I'm disrupting the balance of nature and inviting chaos into the world by engaging in sentient EOD services with a stick. Golly gee, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that all of this was so incredibly orderly, what with all of the explosions everywhere. My bad. Have I ever mentioned how much I love the lifesteal enchantment? I sure do love the lifesteal enchantment. After wasting a solid 40 minutes, engaged in what has to be the singularly dumbest part of Big Game Hunter 6 Revenge of the Wildlife, in which I run up to the extremely angry three-headed flying moose armed with Tomahawk cruise missiles and hit them repeatedly in the face with 2 gold ingots tied together with a piece of string, I was finally able to get rid of all of the stupid withers. The area has also been rendered utterly uninhabitable, largely thanks to said withers, and we're nowhere near the dungeon anymore. They just kind of existed, and then I followed them. Also, nether stars are nice, I guess, so maybe this was sort of kind of useful, but not for the reasons you're thinking. More on that later. Alrighty, what was I doing? Oh yeah, trying to loot the dungeon. Right. Unlike the city, Doom-like dungeons actually have stuff I care about stealing, so expect to see me eat a few more of them at a minimum. In addition to the usual shiny dungeon vanilla garbage drops, these things spawn chests with baubles, silver ingots, healing potions, and potentially high-level enchantments and enchanted gear. Most of the gear is useless because it's not gold, but, you know, they do try. Honestly, I'm more interested in the trash loot table, though, because that contains things like slime balls, lapis, leather, apples, bread, frost rods, frost powder, and more random potions. And there is a whole host of things in that trash loot table that is not otherwise obtainable in a Nether-only run, and I want me some more of that. Also, I promise you, I tried to turn the stupid rain off. I've tried. It just happens. Eventually, I had to disable weather in my world so that it would stop raining in hell. And just like that, this place has already paid off. One of the many, many balls of sentient rock snot known as a magma cube was nice enough to drop me Swifter/5, a book that, in combination with many others, forms the base of an endgame weapons enchantment loadout. Tasty stuff. Pity I had to dig through an entire inventory of bronze tools to pick it up, but progress is progress. And speaking of tasty stuff, can someone please explain why holding a cookie gives me night vision 200? It is a shader thing, and I know it's a shader thing because they did this in my Skyblock run, but it doesn't mean it makes sense. To put it simply, looting dungeons is uninteresting. For you, the viewers at least. For me, it was rather more than interesting, but not in a good way, and the monotony of getting my cheeks clapped harder than a fully loaded freight train receiving standing ovation is broken only by the appearance of a lovely little Lycanite event called Black Plague. Maybe. As far as I can tell, Black Plague did basically nothing to the already excessive Lycanitic mob spawn rates, save perhaps for shifting them a bit more towards the death-themed mobs, because there definitely wasn't enough of a death theme going on already. The only thing that dropped from this that I couldn't otherwise get anyway was a Banshee eyeball, which is useless, but it was at least novel enough to give me something to talk about. Okay, well, that's not entirely true. The only other interesting thing I found in this dungeon was that the dungeon had another dungeon inside of it that had a bunch of cobblestone and a zombie spawner. Now, you know you're hard up when you're happy to see mineable cobblestone, but the actual interesting part here is the zombie spawner, because these have the potential, albeit very slim potential, of letting me get sticks and villager trades unlocked early. Neither of these potentials paid out this time, but I'm going to be keeping an eye out for them in the future. You all don't care about the grinding, though, so, well, okay, maybe. Some of you folks confuse me, not gonna lie. Anyway, I assume most of you don't care about what I got from the dungeon, and are rather more concerned about what I'm going to do with it. And the answer is a fair bit. Quite a lot of the stuff was materials that are only useful in bulk. Stuff like raw ore, smeltable armor, whatever. I got a bunch of potions that I can turn into golden apple juice to finally satisfy my thirst with something other than nether apples and death, and a bulk supply of nether stars as well. Honestly, too many nether stars. I really don't need most of these, but at least they make waystones cheap, which is a nice convenient thing because the commute would be hellish otherwise. The really special things I got were the one-off items that I found. The first was a mending book. It isn't advanced mending, so it's not going to be on my bow, but as such I choose to combine it with a medkit and get some unbreaking on it to make myself a new healing solution instead. Regeneration 2 is okay, I guess, but it's not good, and it consumes 2 bauble slots that really need to be giving me other buffs and make my nunchucks do more than like 1 damage per hit, so I would much rather delegate healing to an external item. The second item is vitamins. Slowness and mining fatigue are not debuffs that I have to worry about because it's the Nether and we have much more exotic ways of causing me nightmares, but it is a good general purpose bauble and I needed one of those. Unfortunately, it rerolls with Spectral Silt, or Nether Stars, and is eventually going to get turned into a shield, so there's no point in doing much with it. Speaking of rerolling, let's go gambling! Aw dang it. 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 Aw dang. Oh, hey, wait, I actually got it. Cool, took long enough. Pro tip for you people making equipment rolling UIs in your video games. Please just let us specify the criteria for a roll and give us an option to roll X number of times and then stop if the rolls meet those criteria early. This RNG rolling nonsense is bad design in the offset, but not having that functionality is just bad UI design, and that's your fault. As a side note, one of the other things that I got in the dungeon was another gold chestplate with Strength and Vitality on it, allowing me to combine it with my own and get Strength and Vitality 2. Very nice, very swag, very expensive investment for a gold chestplate, but it's kind of the only option right now, so I will live with it. Other fun upgrades enabled by this little adventure include a quiver for my backpack slot, a tool belt for my belt slot, wow. Neither of these are particularly good for me, and the quiver, for example, is utterly useless since I have a very limited supply of arrows and no bow with which to shoot them, but they, like vitamins, can hold effective HP rolls, and they have additional advantages in that they are dirt cheap. The last upgrade is even more cooling capacity for my armor. A stolen Aussie liner, plus a bunch of cold slime in the pants, and layers of cold slime in the chest plate, are used to create what is no doubt an absolutely fantastic textured experience 24/7, but they do downgrade the heat of combat to merely just combat, and combined with full cooling enchantments, this should be enough to keep me from roasting my chestnuts over an open fire every time I step in something mildly flammable. As for my next act, do the exact same thing, once again, but with a slightly different kind of dungeon this time. This is a Lycanite dungeon, distinctive from the other two in that it is large, boring, uncreative, and has unique loot tables that might, and I do mean might, have the secret to renewably solving my hydration issues. Oh wait, no, that's literally the same thing as the other two dungeons. My bad. The caveat with Lycanite dungeons, of course, though, is that it's a Lycanite dungeon, which comes with the obvious unfortunate implication of there being Lycanite mobs in it. The first major issue is that yes, Lycanite dungeons do have Lycanite mobs in them, which are universally the single most annoying classification of creature to have to deal with in any quantity, and in the dungeon, the quantity here is yes. The second is that Lycanite mobs are buggy little turd buckets, and most of their projectiles automatically hit your head for reasons I have yet to understand. I have enough armor to deal with that problem, but it also means that 7/8 of my health pool is largely being ignored, and it makes the whole cleanup process messier than it has to be. On the other hand, Lycanite mobs have excellent drop tables, so if I want, I can also farm them out to get a bunch of stuff that would be otherwise difficult to obtain in case it comes in handy later. Or, alternatively, I could just kind of walk through the whole thing uncontested and break the spawners as I go. Not sure what happened to the first boss, or for that matter, most of the spawners, but those suckers are chunky and the spawners are buggy, so whatever it was definitely persistent. Or possibly just glitchy. Lycanite mobs are not known for being terribly intelligent or performant under any sort of normal operating conditions, and I have seen them just casually wander off and clip through walls before. Case in point, this dungeon has floating lava in it. Fascinating. Regardless, it does prove to have at least one of the things I'm looking for, which is oak saplings. A famously logical choice of dungeon loot here in Hell. This is, as far as I'm aware, also one of the only two kinds of trees that we can get access to at all for a certain technical definition of access. That's because even if we had access to, dirt, we could not grow these saplings since they would die almost immediately. But they are one path forward towards getting sticks, so they might be required for a bit of secret sauce down the line. Other interesting lootables include a cobalt shield, which is useless for now, but will get turned into an Ankh shield, and after a thankfully still alive second floor boss kill that I gave the old 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with my nunchucks, a soulstone, which is a writable pet salamander, which is not what I wanted. Interesting thing of note here, Lycanite mounts require custom saddles depending on the type of creature you want to ride. Other interesting note, without exception, every single one of these saddles either requires impossible to obtain ingredients or is for a mount type that I can't get without extreme inconvenience, even by goose standards. With the exception of the beast saddle, all of them need some kind of ice and fire mob drop that is uncraftable, worm scales that is uncraftable, or ender biotite, which is in the wrong dimension. And the beast saddle would require both a custom spawned boss mob to drop a beast soulstone to ride, and a rare Lycanite event to spawn 2 different times and create 2 different currently unobtainable mobs, and I would need to roll the rare drops from one of them to get a rideable mount that is not fireproof at all in the Nether. Safe to say that mounts are not going to be happening in this run. It's only on the third and final floor of the dungeon that I find what I was actually looking for, melon seeds. Truthfully, either melon or pumpkin seeds would have worked here since you can use chorus fruit transformation to get either from the other, but I was aiming for melon either way. Melon, you see, has fantastic thirst-quenching abilities, in addition to its intended use of being a cheap food item. The caveat to this, of course, is that I need some way of growing it, and last I checked, cultivating melons in sand made out of souls of the damned, and watered by the molten mantle of Earth's core, tends to result in air-fried melon seeds more often than it does healthy watermelon vines. Whilst roaming around, I also got an incredibly lucky obsidian skull spawn. This skull is currently unobtainable for me due to a series of incredibly stupid crafting dependencies that terminate in my inability to put water into a bottle, so finding one of them in a dungeon is my only option, and it's pretty important that I did that at some point. All of my armor has to be full protection because RLCraft, leaving me with space for fire protection gear largely non-existent, and I have been toasting my toes as a result. The skull negates half of that fire damage, sometimes, if it feels like it and the modders were coding it correctly, but more relevant for me, it extinguishes me if I'm on fire, which, until I equipped it, I was, pretty much constantly, and this will negate a huge source of chip damage in the future in exchange for me not being immune to weakness and mining fatigue, which are 2 effects that I rarely, if ever, encounter. And I even got it just in time to fight the final boss, the evil dragon at the bottom of its lair. The terrible, the horrible. Children's TV show character. Random question for you all. Do you remember that satirical song where they barbecued Barney's head and served it to a bunch of soldiers? Because I'm really getting that thing playing in my head rent-free right now for some reason. Now, the thing with Puff the Magic Pushover here is that, like most other Lycanite mobs, he's kind of a bit dense. Like, this lad could probably spare 2 brain cells to rub together and create a spark with him, but only if he forgot how to breathe first levels of really dumb. On its own, that wouldn't be a problem, because he also has the charming personal demeanor, upstanding character, and even temperament that you would expect from a giant fleshy homicidal steam locomotive, which tends to compensate a lot when it comes to your survivability, but he also has the size of a giant fleshy homicidal steam locomotive, and in the immortal words of some random dude on the internet, you're stuck. And so I beat his bunions with my bushwhacker from outside the very tiny little door, where he can't reach me and go on about my merry business in no time flat. Obviously. What, you think I was just gonna walk in there and take it? Oh hey look everyone, I found the first boss. It looks like it escaped the arena by existing. Oh well, that was easy enough. And with a little bit of under lava scuba diving, oh look, treasure, how relevant. So anyway, congratulations, you are now familiar with the only 3 types of dungeons that can spawn in the Nether. Yep, yes sir, that is all we have to work with. Do you see any sticks? Because I sure don't. That's because they don't spawn in dungeons. They aren't lootable. On an unrelated note, why are these magma cubes dropping slime balls? Is hell freezing over? I hope not. I only just got the in-armor AC unit finished. RLCraft, please stop being a glitchy piece of junk. Still, sticks not spawning in dungeons is fine though, because I got sticks anyway. Deep in the second Doom-like dungeon I located, I found the holy grail I had been searching for so very long. By which I mean I went like 500 blocks away from my base, tops. This is a wooden poop shack. It's also slightly defended. You know, just a little bit. So while we clear this mess out, let's talk set pieces. There are a number of little set piece structures scattered around the overworld, and for some reason, some of them spawn in the Nether. As far as I'm aware, they are also the only locations for me to get 3 very important things, namely planks, logs, and an initial sample of the oh-so-precious dirt. They are also quite rare, and in my routing I was only able to find a couple with over half an hour of flying around the Nether as fast as I could render new chunks. Still, I got lucky, so I'm not going to look the gift horse in the mouth. The planks, obviously, will be my first source of stickage, since I can actually chop these with an axe, but the most important thing about this isn't the planks, it's the dirt. For you see, dirt is life, or at least lets us create new life. You know, for the moment though, I mostly just care about making tools. The Sinazite Diamond Pickaxe has proven itself to be a shockingly decent piece of equipment, so I'll keep that around, but I have been jonesing for a memetic since the start of the playthrough, so I make one. This tool works as a combination axe, hoe, and shovel, and since I made it out of gold, it's also functionally unbreakable and super fast, so pretty good deal all around, provided that I have XP to fix it with. Now that I have dirt and sticks, a whole bunch of resources that I was ignoring are now also suddenly relevant, and I need large amounts of them. One of these materials is, weirdly enough, gravel? Because gravel plus dirt makes coarse dirt, which can be memeticed into grass paths, which can then be broken into more dirt, meaning that gravel is now pretty much just a slightly more energy-intensive form of potting soil, and I'm gonna want a whole bunch of it for reasons that will be apparent in the next episode. I also now need quite a bit of wood. Trees, last I checked, still are not a fan of growing in hell, so this means I get to go and remove that stand of stalagmites that I oh so painstakingly tunneled my way towards in the first episode, and munch on them for a bit. Tasty nether fungus. I'm gonna go with fungus. Predicated, of course, that my butt is not getting drone striked while I'm trying to go about my day-to-day business. Thank you, Obama. The third resource I need is XP, because, you know, when don't I? But in particular, I also need to start speccing out a couple of rather less used passive abilities, specifically Treasure Hunter. This skill gives you a small chance to turn a block of dirt into a random item pulled from a pretty generously broad loot table, and usually it's either actively detrimental to use because it destroys your dirt sky block, or actively pointless to use because you already have everything you can get from the loot table anyway. I mostly have only used it in the past to farm out music discs for golem armor, but as far as I'm aware, runes aren't a thing in the Nether, so this time around it's going to be for getting overworld items that I wouldn't be able to access normally. Case in point. Wow, look at that! That piece of dirt gave me rotten flesh. Oh boy, what treasure. And also I just broke my memetic because I didn't realize I was out of XP, and I am almost out of gold. Yay! Oh well, easy enough fix for all of that. Loot a dungeon, steal their souls, and also their fancy little forbidden fruit and shiny bits. Tasty tasty. Yet another useless bauble that I will never look at again until I craft the Ankh Shield. Anyway, back to digging. Most of the stuff that drops from treasure hunter loot tables makes abs on a chestplate look downright practical, but there are a few exceptions worth noting, and the biggest one of these is Dragon Bone. Ice and Fire is out of the question since it's an overworld-only mod in this version of the game, but everything needed to make regular Dragonbone equipment is obtainable in the Nether, and in the case of the Dragonbone bow is basically just as strong as its Ice and Fire variants as long as you don't care about the passives. Fire damage in the Nether is right up there with treasure hunter loot tables and chestplate abs on the list of things that are not worth dealing with, and all the ice does is make things slow down, so I think I can survive without those just fine. The other thing that we can do with dirt is grow things on it. I feel like this should go without saying, but on the other hand, not 3 hours ago, I unironically had to explain to an employed professional with several years of working experience and at least one college degree that the reason her computer was not functioning was because she had to press the power button to turn it on first, so I kind of have given up assuming that anyone knows anything anymore. You can plant things in dirt, folks, and sometimes they grow. Wow. Trees kind of do this weird thing where they sprout up and immediately start withering away, which, interestingly enough, is the other way of getting sticks. But vanilla plants, like, say, melon vines, will grow just fine in unwatered soil if you slap them down and hit them hard enough with some bone meal. And 3 to 5 business days later, I have some giant melons. Watermelons, specifically. Growing in a farm, which marks the end of the days of frantically chugging down mystery potion water that I stole from a chest. Melon slices on their own restore quite a fair bit of water. So much so that if you live entirely off melon slices, you usually will never have to drink water again. But in the case that somehow that wasn't enough, Varied Commodities lets you squeeze 3 melon slices into a bowl and call it a salad, which gives you more. Since you can eat a melon salad every time you're below max hunger, this basically solves your hydration needs forever, even harder than you would have otherwise. And so, 26 hours into the run, I can now finally say that I am no longer dying to threats that I should have solved by the first night in the game. Nice. Unfortunately, that is all we have time for today, folks, so I'm going to leave off here by saying thank you for your time, and as always, I hope you enjoyed.